Have you ever really thought about what's going on inside your phone, or your laptop, or even your car? It all feels like some kind of invisible magic, right? Well, it's not magic. It's the result of one of the most insanely complex and high-stakes manufacturing processes humans have ever created. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the impossible art of semiconductors. We're going on a journey from the global economy all the way down to the level of a single atom. All right, let's jump right in. To really get this world, you've got to start with the people on the front lines. I've got a buddy who's an equipment engineer at one of these giant factories. They call them fabs, and he told me he carries 3 phones. Not one, not two, 3. One from Company S, one from Company H, and his personal one. Why? Because a call can come in anytime, day or night. And he says it's never, ever good news. It means one thing: a machine is down, and the clock, it's ticking. And look, when I say the clock is ticking, I am not kidding. For every single minute a key piece of equipment is down, the company's losing about 100 million Korean won. That's a fortune, just poof, vanishing into thin air every 60 seconds. The pressure is just astronomical. Time in this business isn't just money, it's a raging river of money. So that constant pressure, that ticking clock, well, that's what our first section is all about. We're diving into the ridiculously high-stakes world of chip manufacturing. This intense environment where the future is literally being built. This is why these engineers are basically a 5-minute response team. I'm serious, the companies will rent them apartments right next to the factory. The whole point is to make sure they can be on site, suited up, and fixing a problem just minutes after that phone call comes through. It's that kind of insane dedication and work ethic that really helps you understand why this kind of advanced manufacturing is so concentrated in places like East Asia. Okay, so how in the world do they actually make these chips with that kind of pressure hanging over their heads? Well, that brings us to section 2, the physics of smaller. You see, for decades, the name of the game has been the same: just keep shrinking the circuits. But to do that, you have to get into some pretty wild, extreme physics. The main process is something called photolithography. The easiest way to think about it is like developing an old photograph. You have a stencil, which they call a mask, and you shine a light through it to print a super tiny pattern onto a silicon wafer. So here's the key question. If you want to print a finer, more detailed pattern, what do you need? You got it, a finer, more precise beam of light. And this is where the huge revolution happened. For years, the industry used something called deep ultraviolet light, or DUV. It's like using a regular old comb. It works fine, but the teeth are just too thick for the really fine details. The breakthrough is extreme ultraviolet light, or EUV. Now this is like an ultra-fine comb. The light itself is just thinner. Its wavelength is about 10 times smaller than the old stuff. And that thinner light is the secret sauce that lets engineers draw these circuits that are just impossibly small. But okay, what if you don't have access to one of these billion-dollar EUV machines? Well, this is where the engineers get really clever. It's kind of like this. Imagine you have a mosquito net, but the mosquitoes get smaller and start slipping through the holes. If you can't go out and buy a new, finer net, what do? You get creative, right? You take a few of your old nets and you layer them, shifting the patterns just right to make the holes smaller. And that is exactly what some companies do with the older DUV light. They just print multiple patterns on top of each other to create a single, much finer one. It's way harder and more expensive, but man, does it show you the ingenuity in this industry. This level of creativity, it takes us into our next section, a place where the fight for perfection is so intense, they call it the realm of gods. This is where science gets so precise that it honestly starts to feel like magic. Welcome to the clean room, a place where the standards for purity are, well, they're basically beyond human. All right, so you hear these terms all the time, right? 2-nanometer chips, 3 nanometers this and that. But let's be real. Does that actually mean the tiny wires on the chip are only 2 nanometers wide? The short answer is nope, not at all. At a certain point, those numbers stopped being a literal measurement. Now it's more like a brand name. It's marketing. It's a way for a company to say, hey, this is our next generation of technology. And it signifies a certain density of transistors, even if the actual physical wires are quite a bit wider. Okay, so check this out, because here's a little insider secret for you. The rule of thumb in the industry is to take the process name, let's say 2 nanometers, and multiply it by about 4.5. That number is way closer to the actual size of the smallest things on the chip. So a 2-nanometer process is really making features that are closer to 9 nanometers. I mean, it's still unbelievably tiny, but yeah, not quite what the name suggests.
And this drive for precision, it bleeds into everything. There's this famous story about TSMC. They needed one of their gases to be 99.99969% pure. One day, a batch came in that was only 99.9949% pure. Now, to you and me, that difference is completely meaningless. It's the same number. But to TSMC, it was an absolute catastrophe. They scrapped the entire batch of wafers, millions and millions of dollars worth, without a second thought. That's the almost fanatical level of perfection we're talking about here.
But this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. In this sterile world of clean rooms and atomic precision, you find something that you would never, ever expect. Yep, you heard that right. The whole process is so mind-bogglingly complex with so many tiny variables that sometimes even the engineers feel like they're at the mercy of something beyond their control. So in Taiwan, it's not unheard of for engineers to actually bring monks into the fab to perform rituals and pray for a good production yield. It's wild, isn't it? When science reaches its absolute limit, a little bit of faith and tradition has a way of creeping back in. This fanatical quest for perfection is pushing us right up against a hard physical wall, the size of a single atom. We simply can't keep shrinking circuits on a flat surface forever. So what do you do when you hit a wall? You start climbing. And that takes us to our next section, hitting the wall and building up. If you can't build out anymore, you've got to build up. And this is the perfect way to picture the evolution. For the longest time, chips were 2D, like a flat blueprint for a single-story house. Then came what the industry calls 2.5D. That's like stacking identical floors on top of each other to make a simple apartment building. But the true future is 3D architecture. That's like designing a complex skyscraper from the ground up, where every floor is unique and you've got bridges and elevators connecting them in all sorts of crazy ways. This is the next great engineering challenge. But what if even that isn't enough? For our final section, we're going to ask a really radical question. What if the future of computing isn't about the electron at all? I mean, think about it. Our entire digital world is built on one simple idea: shuffling electrons around. But electrons, bless their hearts, they have some fundamental problems. They have mass, which creates resistance and a ton of heat. They have a negative charge, so they're always pushing each other away, which, you guessed it, also generates heat. And as things get smaller and smaller, they can actually leak from one wire to another, causing errors. Heat and errors, those are the two great enemies of modern computing. So what could possibly replace them? Well, meet the photon, a particle of light. Photons are amazing. They have no mass and no charge, and that means they generate no heat. That is a complete game changer. But, and it's a huge but, there's a catch. It's relatively easy to guide an electron down a tiny wire. Trying to trap light in a circuit that small? It's incredibly difficult. Light just doesn't want to be contained. Solving that problem is one of the holy grails of modern physics. Which leaves us with this final, massive question. Are we watching the beginning of the end of the age of the electron? The challenges are absolutely immense, but the potential rewards are even bigger. Whether the future is built on photons or the quantum spin of particles, or maybe even room temperature superconductors, one thing is for sure. The next great technological leap for humanity is being figured out right now, deep inside the impossible, incredible art of the semiconductor.